speaker today, who is Stuart Knight. Stuart Knight is a graduate from the School of Business of Economics at Wilfrid Laurier University, and today is an entrepreneur, author, writer, and producer extraordinaire. He has written and produced and starred in shows that have been seen by over 1 million people, and each year speaks nationally, helping some of Canada's biggest companies reach new levels of success. Not only is he on the road, but he's writing songs, he produces commercials, and when he's not going across the country as well as writing, you can see or hear him on some of Canada's biggest TV and radio stations. He's the winner of many awards, including the National Entrepreneurs Award for Community Leadership. And he has shared the stage with notable names such as Robin Sharma, Lisa Ray, Brett Wilson, and Jenny McCarthy. There's many other things, such as the Top 10 event right now that he's launched and has garnered almost 20 million media impressions. And he has a new book entitled, You Should Have Asked, The Art of Powerful Conversation. And today he has joined us to talk about the powerful conversations and how that contributes to leadership and his own success. At this point in time, I'm going to pass it over to Stuart. And just let me know when you want me to turn the slides.
All right, absolutely. Well, thanks for all tuning in, folks. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you guys took time out of your day. Hopefully I'll be able to offer you a few things that will have a big impact on you. The reality is that we only have a short period of time together, so I'm really only going to be able to just touch on a few key components of being able to create powerful conversations with the intentions of being a true leader. And so if you have some questions, and probably I guess near the end might be easier for all of us, just so that we don't get too sidetracked. I'm happy to answer those. And it's funny that with these types of topics, because in my travels now, I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 16 years, and in that time, I've really learned that powerful conversation is this one thing that has a huge impact on your life if you choose to do it. However, on the flip side, there are so many people out there who think they're doing it, and they really aren't, which is usually indicative of the, let's say, small number of people who might come out to an event such as this, or who might tune in for something like this, or even when people are flipping through the videos that are offered by the Small Business Solver, there's so many individuals that will look at something like this and say, oh, yes, powerful conversation. I've got that. I know what I'm doing. And the dramatic irony is that they actually don't. They think that because they're able to keep words coming out of their mouth and once in a while out of the person that they're speaking to, they think that they're really powerful conversationalists, and they're actually not. There's a very big difference between being able to create a powerful conversation and just a regular conversation. So 99%, probably 100% of the world's population is able to create a conversation, and about maybe 1 or 2% of the world's population are able to create powerful conversations. The truth is that everyone has the ability to do it. The only thing is that most people don't do it. They don't do it deliberately. So I want you all to first of all think about this. I'm going to put a little disclaimer out there. If you have tuned in the past for some of these webinars, you may be used to having quite a few slides pop up. For me, I'm not really much of a slide guy. My main thing is to go out there and to get on stage, and I talk for usually an hour to 75 minutes, sometimes up to 3 hours if it's a workshop. And so I'm hoping that you just allow yourself for the next 20 minutes or so to not be distracted by your phone, if your text messages are going off, or emails. Just close it all down and just take this stuff in. So think about this, folks. When it comes to powerful conversation, when it comes to being a leader, there's nobody in the world who can be successful in any aspect of their life without people, right? So it's people who hire us and fire us. It's people who promote us and demote us. It's people who buy from us or don't buy from us. It's people who in the office go out of their way for us or they don't go out of their way. Or if we have employees, it's people who will work hard for us or not work hard for us. And they do all these different things based on the way that they feel about us. More specifically, they do all these things based on the way that we make them feel. Okay, so when people speak to you, when they have a conversation with you, a question that I'm sure you've probably not asked yourself is, how do people really feel after they speak with me? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel important? Do they feel interesting? Do they feel heard? Do they feel like they can trust you? And based on the way that you've made them feel is indicative of whether or not you've given them the incentive to want to buy from you, to want to hire you, to want to promote you, to want to go out of their way for you, or to want to work hard for you. If you don't make that effort to make people feel that way, then you've given them absolutely no reason to want to help you be a success. And it amazes me, so many people, they think that just hard work will do it. They think that if they go into the office every single day and they just put their nose to the grindstone and they get out all the emails, they send the text messages, they have the phone meetings, they think that that's enough. And in many cases, it's enough to survive. It's definitely enough to, make a certain amount of business work. But if you really want to thrive in business, you need to be kind of the individual that can put their head down on the pillow every single day and say, I know that people felt awesome after speaking to me today. I know that people felt really empowered and interesting, and I know that they felt important. If you've made them feel that way, you've then just given them every single reason to want to work with you, to want to promote you to their own friends, their own family, their own colleagues, and to do the best that they can for you. And this is, to be honest, guys, this is something that, the most successful people that I've met in the last 16 years, they really understand it. Every single time I speak to anybody, whether they're a prime minister of a country, or they're a CEO of a major Fortune 500 company, or they are just a great mom, a great dad, every time I speak to these people, eventually it gets to the place where we talk about the fact that they have that ability, I should say they use that ability to go out there and create powerful conversations on a daily basis, not just conversations. And that's really what I want you guys to get present to today. Now, I've learned this with my own company. I used to do a show years ago where I would watch, at the end of my show, we would invite the audience to stay and they would get to know each other. And it was really interesting. I would notice how people were struggling with being able to create powerful conversations. And that was when I decided to kind of start looking into it more and to see if there was something deeper that I might discover. And I discovered that, my own company, that we've always been very successful, and we've managed to kind of beat the competition, if you will, time in and time out. I've always thought that was because we just worked harder, or that I just hired better people. But with a little research, it turns out that other people are doing that as well. Other people are hiring good people. Other people are, working hard. And I noticed that something that we were doing that a lot of people weren't doing was that we were taking the time to create powerful conversations with three different subsets. So the first thing is that whenever I have a meeting with my team, and I don't know what position you're in for those who are listening, if you have your own team or if you've got employees, I would encourage you to do this. The first thing I always do whenever I get together with my team is we all know that I have a rule that we're not allowed to speak to each other about work. Okay? Even though we're busy, we've got a lot of stuff on the table, what we do first is we actually speak to each other about life. And we just check in with each other. How was the weekend? What have you been up to lately? How are the kids? Whatever. But when we're doing that, we're creating human bonds. We're creating human relationships and commonality. And what I'm doing is I'm giving my team every single reason to work hard for me. But I'm also giving them every single reason to work hard for each other. And on top of that, I'm giving them every single comfortability to be able to go across the room and speak to each other, and to, if they have a gripe with one of their fellow employees, they don't feel uncomfortable doing it because on so many occasions they've actually spoken to them like a real human being and not just a number. So I create that environment deliberately so that I get the best from my team. The second thing I do is I make sure that whenever a client calls me, and I'm sure some of you are in, you have a sales component to your job. I mean, all small business people do. And when a client calls you and they want to ask you about your prices, they want to ask you about what kind of services you provide, a lot of small business people, what they do is they make the mistake of just answering those questions. They'll say, "Oh, thanks for calling. Well, here are my prices, and here are the services that we provide, or here are the attributes of my product." And I always say, the worst thing you can ever do when you're trying to sell something is to try to sell the actual thing you want to sell. The best thing you can do is to actually ask them how their day is going. And then from there, you can apply some of the things I'll be teaching you in a second to create a relationship. So get them talking about their weekend. Get them talking about what they're looking forward to, this Christmas or the holiday season. Get them talking about, something fun they've done lately or a vacation they've recently been on. Once you get them talking about those things, you're building a human relationship. And thus you're giving them every reason to want to hire you, because people always buy from people that they like. And this is something I've been doing my entire life, and in many cases I wasn't even aware of it. I'm just always been fascinated in people, and that's the reason I've asked those questions. However, it always led me to more business. The third thing that my company does that a lot of companies don't do is that my team is fully instructed to get out there and to talk to our customers. And that in many cases are the people in my seminars, the people in my audience. But they're instructed to go out there and to actually ask them good questions about their lives and to connect with the customer. And then by connecting with the customer, what we're doing is, I always say to my team, we're building our sales force. Now imagine, folks, as you heard Carla say, I've spoken to 1 million people in the last 16 years. Never once have I not stayed behind to speak to my customers, to my audience. And never once, not once have I not done that. So by doing that, you can imagine how big my sales force is now. What I've done is I've taken the time to get to know people, and by, I guess, through osmosis, I've given them every reason to want to recommend me to other people. So my sales force now is enormous. And then when I'm doing a presentation on this, I ask my audience, I say, how big is your sales force? And to those of you who are listening right now, how big is your sales force? How many people are out there promoting you? Is it one person, just your mom, or is it your best friend or your partner? How many people are promoting you? And the answer to that question is based on how many people you engage on a weekly basis. How many people do you make feel important, powerful, interesting, and heard? And if you're making a lot of people feel that way, then you're increasing your sales force, okay? And now, if you only have 1 or 2 people right now in your sales force, don't worry about it, because by the end of this week, you can have 20, as long as you kind of apply some of the things I'll be talking about in a second. Okay, so let's get into why it is that we're losing this gift, this art of powerful conversation. To me, there are a few things that I want to get into just before we get into part 2 questioning, because part 2 questioning is really interesting. The one thing I want to get you guys thinking about is something called, fear and technology. Okay, so these are 2 things that are playing a role in your life, and because they play a role in all of our lives. And so when it comes to conversation, the first thing that people are afraid of is they're afraid of speaking to strangers. You see this all the time, especially in big cities. People don't speak to strangers. And the reason they don't speak to strangers is because they learned this when they were little kids. Right? We learned that strangers are bad, don't speak to strangers, which of course is good advice for kids. However, we need to now start making it part of our daily routine to start speaking to strangers. And by speaking to strangers, we will start adapting and developing these skills in order to be able to become, to be good at it when we want to be good at it. Okay? The second thing that we are told when we're little kids to be afraid of when it comes to powerful conversation is we're told that there are certain things you're allowed to speak about and there are certain things you're not allowed to speak about. So you need to really wrap your head around that. A lot of people are walking around planet Earth with these list of 5 subjects that are safe, and then there are 100 other subjects you can't talk about. And this is just a story that we've created in our minds. Somewhere along the line, you may have asked somebody a question that was considered taboo, and your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or partner or whatever, they kicked you into the table and said, "Oh, you can't do that." And we started believing it. But the only reason that person said that to us in the first place is because they believed it. And it's just a set of rules that has been created by a bunch of people. And I can tell you, after speaking to 1 million people, I ask people kind of, over-the-top taboo, quote-unquote taboo questions all the time. And they love it. They appreciate it because no one's asking them anything real. So that's the first thing we want to do, okay? Take a look at how fear plays a role in the conversations that you're willing to create on a daily basis, and how those fears are in fact getting in the way of your success. Because if you're afraid to create a powerful conversation, well then what you're doing is you're putting yourself into a place where you're not building relationships. Okay? The second thing that we're told, or that's getting in the way of our success when it comes to powerful conversations, is technology. So you have to ask yourself, what role is technology playing in my own life? Is it the main question you have to ask yourself is whether or not technology is allowing you to hide from people. And people are using it as a way of, they believe they're using it as a way of communicating. They're saying, no, I'm in touch with all my customers. I'm in touch with all my clients. I'm constantly texting them and emailing them. I'm constantly tweeting. I'm constantly putting postings on Facebook. And I think that's important. You do have to do that for your business. I do that for mine. However, if you're not taking the time to actually call them, talk to them voice to voice, or having face-to-face meetings from time to time, then what you're doing is you're using technology as a means of hiding from your customer. Okay, so sometimes people will, for example, make a phone call to somebody, and they actually hope to get the person's answering machine and not the person. They'd prefer to leave a message so they don't actually have to build a relationship. But if you're doing that, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're killing your business. So try to shift that. Try to shift away from A, the fears that you have around conversation because they're just stories that have been created by other people, and B, try to recognize how much you're using technology to get in the way, okay, of your success. Okay, next thing I want to share with you is just before we get into part 2 questioning are the things that I say that the 5 things that we want to aim for in order to make conversations powerful. Okay, so when you're speaking to somebody, number 1, you want to learn something new about them. All right, people have so much to share. Try to learn something new. Number 2, what we want to do is we want to give that person a chance to speak about something that is meaningful to them. Okay, a lot of us are very good when we speak to people at making sure that we're going on and on and on about how much we like the Toronto Maple Leafs, or that we love vacationing in Peru, or that we love a particular brand of clothing. And the other person has no interest in that subject. And at the end of it, we feel like we've had such a great connection because we feel so good because we've just spoken about things that matter to us. So you try to shift that. Get them speaking about things that matter to them. Number 3, what we want to do is we want to make the conversation memorable. So you want to try to make the conversation different than all the other conversations they're having that day. And to be honest, that's actually not too difficult because most people repeat the same kinds of conversations with a bunch of different people throughout the day. So try to shift it. Move it into a conversation about things that they're excited about, or a scary experience that happened to them recently, or something that's to do with their children. I mean, take them away from the conversations they're repeating. The 4th thing we want to do is we want to find out what we have in common with that person. And a lot of people, they look at individuals and they say, oh, we have a different color of skin, or we're different backgrounds, or different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever it may be. And we think that we don't have anything in common with that person. It's your job to discover those things that you share in common, because if you can find out what you have in common with your customer, with your client, and your colleague, you have totally increased your chances of being successful when it comes to your business. And the last thing is try to have more fun. A lot of people are really too serious when it comes to creating conversations. They think that they have to only talk about business. And God, that's what happens for that customer with every other person they talk to throughout that day. So try to make it more fun. Like, look at something that's happening in current events and talk about it. Talk about the Barack Obama Mitt Romney race. Make a joke about it. Get them having a bit of a laugh, even if it's just for a minute or so. That distinction between you and your competition is enormous. Okay, so those are the 5 things. Number 1, we want to learn something new. Number 2, we want to make it meaningful for them. Number 3, we want to make it memorable. Number 4, we want to find out what we have in common. And number 5, we want to make it more fun. So what I'm going to do now, guys, in about less than 10 minutes, is I'm going to give you 4 simple things that you can do to create powerful conversations with people, okay? And like I said, we're just kind of going to give this, a 30,000-foot aerial view on this. Okay, the first thing you want to talk about is part 2 questioning, so we can put that slide up now. So part 2 questioning is something that I encourage people to use when they're having short interactions with someone. So that could be you bump into a colleague in the hallway, or you're on an elevator with somebody, you bump into a customer in line at Tim Hortons. You may be in a situation where you have to call a client, and you make that small talk for let's say 3 or 4 minutes before you get into the business. that you have to speak to them about. These are all short moments that usually last less than 5 minutes. So how do you make something that's less than 5 minutes turn into something powerful? How do you use that short period of time to connect with them and to talk about, more than just the weather, okay, or traffic, which is something that a lot of people speak about. And when people do that, they're making no connection. They're literally, it's just a waste of time. So how do you do it? Well, you do it with part 2 questioning. So when you speak to somebody, you say, hey, Bob, how was your weekend? Let's say you're calling a customer on a Monday, and Bob comes back and says, oh, it was really great, but I was busy. Well, what we want to do is we want to make the effort to ask good questions on that specific answer that Bob just gave us, okay? A lot of people will make the mistake and they'll come back and say something like, oh, yeah, you were busy, so did you get lots done? And then Bob just comes back and goes, yeah, I did. I got lots done. So we're not giving Bob the opportunity to expand, and thus we're not getting to what I call the core of the onion. You want to peel the layers of that onion back and get to something significant quickly, okay? So we say to Bob, how was his weekend? Bob comes back and says, oh, it was good, but I was busy. So you want to ask a good part 2 question, a good question on that answer. So one way you can do that is by simply coming back and saying, oh, yeah, well, out of all the things that you had on your plate, what was one of the biggest things that you were hoping to clear off? Okay, you see, every person who's listening to this right now has the ability to ask that kind of question, yet most people don't. They don't think that way. And Bob might come back and go, oh, well, my wife and I had a last-minute garage sale. We wanted to clear a bunch of things out of the garage. Well, he's just answered your question now. All you have to do is say to yourself and be committed and be conscious and say, okay, I'm now going to ask a good question on that specific answer. So you might come back and say, oh, yeah, so out of all the things that you were hoping to sell, what was one of the bigger items you wanted to clear out? Once again, a very simple question, yet most people don't ask it. And Bob might come back and say, well, my kids are off in university now, so we wanted to get rid of their bikes. They don't use them anymore. He's just fed you the next question. All you have to do is stay present and be clear on asking him a good question on that answer. Now, a lot of people would come back and say, oh, your kids are in university. What school are they going to? And what they've done is they've just killed the conversation, because the guy's going to come back and go, oh, well, one's at University of Toronto, one's at Windsor, and one's at U of T, or, Ryerson, let's say. Instead, come back and make it better. So come back and say something like, oh, your kids are off in university, so how are they enjoying that experience? You see, this automatically changes things. Now Bob will tell you how the kids are enjoying the experience. He might say one of them's having a bit of a tough time. The second he starts saying that, the two of you are connecting like human beings. And what you're doing is you're giving Bob a chance to speak about something that's important to him. On top of that, there might be a relatability factor. Maybe you used to feel concerned about some of the decisions that you had made in university. And on top of that, maybe, let's say Bob said something like, well, one of my kids is worried that he's in the wrong program. He doesn't know if he wants to do this for the rest of his life. Well, let's say a month down the road you're reading the newspaper and you come across an article that says 50% of all university students are feeling concerned about decisions they're making in school. Well, what you can now do is you can actually send that article to Bob based on the conversation that you had. Had you not had that conversation with Bob before, you would read that article and you wouldn't think anything of it. Okay? So you're giving yourself reasons to give something back to your customer. And the second you send that email to Bob is the second Bob's going to look at you differently than all of your competition. And you've now given Bob every reason to want to work with you, to buy from you, to recommend you, and become part of your sales force. Okay? But you wouldn't have never been able to do that if you didn't ask good questions on the answer, part 2 questioning. Okay? The second thing I want you to consider is something I call the true story conversation, which is why questioning. Okay? And so with why questioning, I learned this from little kids. Little kids, they're great at asking why, right? They're kind of incessant when they ask it all the time. But I think it's great. I think that we as adults have stopped asking each other why. And one of the things I always say to people is that, where you work, where you live, where you went to school, all of that is just factual information about you. But why you did those things, that's meaningful information about you. So why did you choose that school? Why do you vacation where you do? Why do you wear those clothes like that particular fashion? Why did you get married in that church? All that stuff's really meaningful. And when I find out the meaningful parts of you, I give you an opportunity to give me things that I can, in the future, come back to. So I can talk to you. If you're one of my colleagues and you've told me, I asked you what you did in the weekend and you said, oh, we moved to a new part of town, And I said to you, oh, why'd you move to a new part of town? And you said, well, my husband's mother unfortunately has Alzheimer's, and so she lives in that part of town, so we wanted to be closer to her. Automatically, you're two human beings having a real human connection. And all you said was, oh, why did you choose to move to that part of town? As opposed to, what does your house look like? Or, do you have parking? Right? These are not kinds of questions that are going to help us connect with a human being. So you want to ask why as much as you possibly can. The second thing that when you ask why, what it does for you is that it gives people the chance to do something that most people want to do and very rarely ever get the chance to do, and that is tell their story. Okay? Like, I can tell you guys, if there's anything I've learned, it's that people love telling their story and that nobody gives them a chance to tell it. So what a great opportunity for you. What an advantage. No one's doing it, so why don't you do it? Start asking people, oh, yeah, you went on vacation to Ecuador. That sounds like a lot of fun. Do you mind me asking you, why did you choose Ecuador over other places? Because it didn't just happen by chance. Okay, so give them a chance to share that part of their story. And then if they tell you something like, oh, the fact they love scuba diving, maybe it comes around Christmas time and you're buying a little present for your customers, buy them a magazine on scuba diving as opposed to a bottle of wine, because they might not drink wine. But a magazine on scuba diving will probably cost you $12 a year, and what a difference it's going to make from a sales perspective and a customer relations perspective. And you couldn't have done it if you didn't ask them why they went to Ecuador, as opposed to going, oh, that must have been a lot of fun. Okay? So ask why. Give people a chance to tell their story because they want to tell it. The third or fourth things I want to tell you is something called, like I touched on this before, which is taboo questioning, right? People are always like, oh, my God, no, I can't ask people real questions about their lives. And I got to tell you that I do this every single day. And yes, out of every 100 people I ask a taboo question to, maybe 2 or 3 say, oh, well, that's a bit personal. Well, you know what? That's fine. I back out and I say, sorry, I didn't mean to get too personal, but I hope that I didn't offend you. And they're always like, oh, no, it's okay, it's okay. However, the other 97% of the people are like, wow, you know what? That's an interesting question. And they're willing to come back and actually speak to me about it. So, folks, we have to do this. When it comes to taboo questioning, we have to remember something very important. We have to remember that every human being we interact with goes through a lot of the same ups and downs that we go through. So they got people get frustrated about having to pay high mortgages, or people get angry with, the fact that they wanted their business to be at a certain level by now and it's not, or they're having arguments with their kids or arguments with their partner. Hey, look, it's life. We go through it. And so no one's giving those people the chance to talk about it, though. Okay? Everyone always just thinks that someone else is giving them a chance to speak about it. And so that's where, once again, the opportunity is, it takes place for you, where you can say to somebody, if you've got a coworker that you've seen who hasn't been themselves over the last few weeks, take them out for lunch and say, hey, look, I couldn't help it, you haven't been yourself lately. Do you mind me asking if everything's okay? Once in a while, the person will say, oh, everything's fine. But from my experience, people will say, wow, thanks for asking. No one's even asked me about that. Yeah, things have been really difficult for me lately. I've been, feeling really frustrated about my relationship, or, my kid's getting in trouble at school right now. Whatever it might be, and usually these are things that every one of us can understand, relate to, and deal with as adults, because we've either been there ourselves or we know someone who's been there. And yet most people are so afraid to go into these kinds of conversations because they think they're so taboo, they're so politically incorrect, and they're so off limits. And I can tell you right now, once again, that is just a story that other people have created. Now, look, folks, as adults, you do have to have a certain type of decorum, and you have to have a certain maturity about this. You don't just walk up to people every day and just ask them personal questions about themselves. But don't be afraid to ask good questions that might lead a person into talking about some of the challenges they're facing. You walk into an office and you say to the receptionist, how's it going? And she says, oh, it's good, one of those days. Don't be afraid to come back and say, oh, yeah, well, what's making it one of those days? Or you've got a client that you've been dealing with for quite a few years, and you've got a pretty good relationship with them, and you say, hey, Susan, how's it going? Susan comes back and goes, oh, it's pretty good. Yes, it's nice. Don't be afraid to come back and say, oh, yeah, well, on a scale from 1 to 10, how good would you say specifically? She might come back and say, oh, I'm a 5 out of 10. And then the next thing you know, you're already, boom, into a powerful conversation simply because you were willing to go there, okay? You've got that coworker who's off, take them out for lunch, like I said. But don't be afraid to ask people good questions that are sometimes a bit taboo because they do want to speak about this, and no one's giving them a chance to speak about it because they think that it's off limits. Okay, so look for those opportunities and do something that most people never do, and all leaders do. Okay. All right, the last one, creative questioning. God, folks, people are bored. All right, they're bored. They're going throughout their week, and they're rarely getting the chance to speak about things that are that interesting. And so this is something that I encourage you to use as a mechanism to get them talking about things that really are going to make a big difference with respect to the chance to have some critical thinking, the chance to expand their mind. Okay, so I do this every single week. So for example, you're talking to a client and they start talking about how they went to the University of Western. Ask them a creative question. Say something like, oh yeah, you went to the University of Western, that's great. So what was one of your best experiences there? Or what was one of your favorite things about going to that school? Or what was one of the things that really used to make you laugh when you went to that school? I mean, it's a creative question, okay? It's something that they don't normally hear, but it gets them thinking, and it gives them some fun. It gives them a chance to talk about things they don't normally get a chance to speak about. Okay? Ask them something like that. Or someone says, I just got back, you're talking to a colleague, and they say, I just got back from vacation in Australia. And say, oh, wow, that's great. And, of course, you'll talk to them about their vacation a little bit. But at the end of that conversation, say something like, so if you could snap your fingers and go anywhere in the world right now, where would it be? All right? They might come back and say, it would be Brazil. And then, of course, you'll come back and ask them a why question. Oh, why would you say Brazil? Then they'll start answering that question. And before you know it, by starting off with a creative question, you're having a powerful conversation simply because you're willing to start off with something creative. Another example, and the last example I'll give you is, you're talking to a potential client, and you're having some friendly talk at the beginning, and you say, well, so how's work going for you guys these days? And the person comes back and says, it's been a challenging time this year, and, things were a lot better 2 years ago. Then ask them something creative, okay? Show that you care. Show that you're interested. Show that you're different. Say something like, all right, well, if you could snap your fingers and eliminate one challenge that you're facing today, what would that challenge be? All right? This is something that your competition doesn't do. And when you do that, it shows these people that you pay attention to detail, that you are present, that you're current, that you're smart, that you're interesting. And then, of course, once they answer that question, you now have something meaty to work with as opposed to the stuff that you had to work with when you asked them about, the weather. How you feel about the weather these days? It's been pretty cold out there, right? If that's what your competition does, let them. You have to be the one that distinguishes yourself from your competition. You have to be the one that's creating these amazing human relationships. Okay, so ask these. Those are the four kinds of sections of questioning. And the last one there is the slide that we jumped ahead to was the powerful conversations you have with yourself. Folks, as entrepreneurs or as just human beings going through life, it does get tough sometimes, and there are days when we wish we were making more money, or that we didn't have to go through that breakup, or that didn't have to go through those struggles and challenges. And this is where I always say to people, we really owe it to ourselves to have as many powerful conversations with ourselves as we possibly can, because we need to remember that every human being on planet Earth who's doing anything great did not get there easily. They had their ups and downs. They got knocked down many times. And they wouldn't have made it to where they did if they hadn't been willing to have a powerful conversation with themselves. So just know that if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to look yourself in the eye and say, okay, you know what, today kind of sucked, but tomorrow is going to be better. We can work harder at this. I have what it takes. I am smart enough. I just need to get creative here. I just need to kind of dig deep. If you're willing to do that, just that psychological self-talk will have such an amazing thing. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be where I am today if I wasn't willing to have all the countless powerful conversations I've had with myself over the last 16 years and will continue to have between now and the day that I die. So don't be afraid to do that, because there's not enough people out there encouraging us, so we got to do it for ourselves. Okay, so that's basically a really, really fast overview of creating powerful relationships with your customers, your clients, your colleagues, and the importance of having a powerful relationship with yourself, and to just really recognize that people live in a world where they're rarely being engaged in anything interesting, where they're rarely being asked to use their mind with respect to critical thought, and they're rarely given an opportunity to share some of their opinions in their lives or their story, or to share things that are really important to them. So that's where your competitive advantage comes in. You get to do something that most people are not doing, and you'll see that if you commit yourself to it for now and for the rest of your life, that there is no way that it's not going to have a positive impact. So there you go, folks. I am finito. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them quickly right now. Otherwise, we can wrap it all up.
Hey,